Hi, you're here because you're interested in learning more about state tax considerations for Maryland's emerging adult use cannabis industry. Let's get started. During this presentation, we'll discuss the role of the Comptroller of Maryland's office, tax registration and business licensing requirements, sales and use tax information for cannabis businesses, bFile, and what businesses need to do to be tax compliant, and where to get additional help with questions about Maryland state taxes. During this presentation, when I discuss cannabis, that includes any products containing cannabis, cannabis concentrate, cannabis extract, or other ingredients, and are intended for use or consumption, including edibles. You may be asking, what does the Comptroller's office in Maryland do? We're probably best known as the agency that collects most state taxes, such as sales and use tax, including sales and use tax on the sale of adult use cannabis, employer withholding tax, motor fuel tax, alcoholic beverages tax, tobacco tax, Maryland income tax, and more. We produce the tax forms that are used to report the tax, and we host an electronic filing platform called bFile. You'll hear more about that in a few minutes. We issue refunds when tax is overpaid. We keep the state's accounts and distribute the revenue collected to various funds as directed by law. We enforce compliance with the tax laws, for example, sending collection letters and performing audits. We also enforce compliance with business licensing laws. Note, the Comptroller's office is not responsible for issuing cannabis industry licenses. That function is handled by the Maryland Cannabis Administration. If you're just getting started with a new business, there can be a lot of information to digest. So where do you get started with regard to state taxes? Register the business with the Maryland Department of Assessments and Taxation. Next, register with the Comptroller's office for tax accounts. This can be employer withholding if you have employees, sales and use tax if you make sales, or untaxed purchases for use. You'll get a combined registration number assigned to you, and also a sales and use tax license will be issued. You can complete both registrations online at Maryland Business Express. The address is https://businessexpress.maryland.gov. Best of all, there is no charge to register for a sales and use tax license. Free is great when you're starting a new business. Businesses making retail sales of cannabis and cannabis products must obtain a trader's license from the clerk of the circuit court of the county in which the business is located. If a business operates more than one sales location subject to the same ownership or general management, the business must also obtain a chain license from the clerk's office. Again, remember, the sales and use tax license and trader's license are separate from cannabis industry licenses that are issued by the Maryland Cannabis Administration. Let's talk some more about sales and use tax. Here's some information for businesses. Effective July 1, 2023, retail sales of adult use cannabis and cannabis products are subject to 9% sales and use tax. Adult use cannabis will be sold at licensed dispensaries and in the future at licensed on-site consumption establishments. Each location must report sales and use tax separately. You must be 21 years or old to purchase adult use cannabis. The rules for medical cannabis still apply, and patients will continue to be able to purchase cannabis tax-free. While the cannabis rate is 9%, not everything sold in Maryland is subject to the same sales and use tax rate. Edible products, food and beverages that contain cannabis, are considered cannabis products, and so they are subject to the 9% tax. Vaping liquid containing cannabis is also considered a cannabis product, and it's subject to the 9% sales and use tax rate. Electronic smoking devices, also known as vape pens, that are preloaded or prepackaged with cannabis are subject to a 9% sales and use tax rate. However, electronic smoking devices alone and tobacco pipes are subject to 12% sales and use tax. Rolling papers, glass pipes, lighters, and other non-cannabis products, such as hats or t-shirts, those are subject to a 6% sales use tax. If you are selling, it's important that your point of sale system be programmed appropriately to reflect these rates. What happens after you start selling? Well, if you're making retail sales, you need to file sales and use tax returns. There's a place on the sales tax return for you to check a box if you're reporting tax from the sale of cannabis products. You also need to provide the physical location of where the sales are being made. That's important because Maryland counties will be receiving a percentage of the revenue collected from the sales and use tax on the sale of adult use cannabis. That's also why each location where cannabis is sold is required to report separately. Sales and the sales tax collected are reported on line 12 of the return. Due to federal banking restrictions, we don't use the word cannabis on the sales tax form. Instead, line 12 language refers to sales subject to the 9% rate under Senate Bill 516 of 2023. But that's the line where adult use cannabis sales and the tax collected need to be reported. If your business is doing the work of collecting sales tax and remitting it by the due date, then Maryland thanks you by offering a timely filing discount of up to $500 per return. The specific amount is calculated based on how much tax is collected and paid. But don't forget to claim this discount on line 14. If you're paying on time, you're entitled to it. Line 23 is available in the rare instances in which your business needs to report use tax on purchases of cannabis. Here's some information about sales and use tax exemptions for cannabis businesses. Sales for resale are exempt from the sales and use tax. Purchasers must provide the vendor with a resale certificate or else the vendor is required to charge the sales tax. Business-to-business sales between cannabis licensees are exempt. However, the record-keeping requirements do apply. An agricultural exemption applies to sales of certain farm equipment. You can find more information about that on marylandtaxes.gov in business tax tip number 11. There's also an exemption for sales of tangible personal property, digital codes, and digital products that are used directly and predominantly in production activities. You can find more information there at business tax tip number 9. Important to note, if you are making sales direct to home growers, those sales are not exempt. What about sales to charitable, educational, or religious organizations that have been issued a sales and use tax exemption certificate? Typically, those organizations are not going to be able to make exempt purchases. That's because in order to qualify for the exemption, the purchase must be made to carry on the work of the organization. The purchase cannot be for the personal use of officials, members, or employees of the organization. Exempt organizations also cannot make exempt purchase of cannabis to resell as a fundraiser. And that's because the sale of cannabis can only be made by a business licensed by the Maryland Cannabis Administration. Now there's some information about sales and use tax exemptions regarding sales to individuals. First off, sales of medical cannabis are exempt from the sales and use tax at dispensaries and on-site consumption establishments. The patient or caregiver must provide their medical information card that's issued by the Maryland Cannabis Administration or its predecessor agency, the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission, if that card has not expired. Any amount of cannabis sold to a patient or caregiver that exceeds the amount that is certified by their provider is considered an adult use sale and is subject to the sales and use tax. And remember to retain records of tax-exempt sales of medical cannabis for a period of 4 years. At the Comptroller's office, bFile stands for business filing, and it's available at www.bfile.gov. bfile.marylandtaxes.gov. bFile is your one-stop site for filing and paying the following business taxes electronically: your sales and use tax, employer withholding tax, the annual withholding reconciliations, alcoholic beverages tax, and also admissions and amusement tax. If the Comptroller has sent you a business tax bill, you can also use bFile to pay that business tax bill using the Bill Pay feature. Tax compliance means a business or individual is following the laws related to collecting and paying tax. One of the rules for sales and use tax is how frequently a business is required to file a return. A business's filing frequency for sales and use tax is determined by the Comptroller based on sales volume. So follow the instructions in the notice the Comptroller sends to your business indicating how often your business is required to file. If you're designated a monthly filer, then returns are due the 20th of the month following the month in which the sales were made. For example, a return reporting sales tax collected in July is going to be due on August 20th. For quarterly filers, returns are due the 20th of the month following the end of the quarter. In that case, a return reporting sales collected in July, August, and September is going to be due on October 20th. Another example of the tax laws are record-keeping requirements that are imposed on businesses. Vendors must retain records of sales to demonstrate that the business has collected and paid the sales and use tax correctly. Businesses should also keep all records pertaining to sales and purchases for 4 years. If you have more questions about state taxes, visit our website at www.marylandtaxes.gov. You can also email questions to taxhelp@marylandtaxes.gov. If you prefer to give us a call, staff are available Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at 1-800-638-2937, or from Central Maryland, you can call 410-260-7980. Thanks for watching this presentation from the Office of the Comptroller of Maryland.